Hello and welcome back to another session on literary criticism and theory. The last concept in literary concept is archetypal criticism. We have covered all the concepts, but archetypal criticism is something that you had already learned in methodology of literature in the last semester. We had learned that in detail. So I am using the same video because it's the same content that what has been explained, everything is the same here as well. So I'm using the same video so that you will be able to understand it well. So archetypal criticism. What is archetypal criticism? In literary criticism, the term archetype denotes recurrent narrative designs, patterns of action, character types, themes and images which are identifiable in a wide variety of works of literature. You will see that in myths, dreams and even social rituals. Okay, such recurrent items are usually held to be the result of elemental and universal patterns in the human psyche. So listen to the video which we did last semester. I'm using the same video so that it'll be easier for you to learn, because a lot of changes going on, literature and the texts were being read. There were other changes happening in connection with other disciplines. A renewed interest in social anthropology, mythology and psychoanalysis were coming up. They offered new insights regarding the reading of literature. The most prominent was archetypal literary criticism. Now, archetype is from the Greek word arche, which means beginning, and typos, which means imprint. So it means original pattern in Greek. According to these archetypes, or according to which this original pattern means, according to it, archetypes are the contents of the collective unconscious. They are the primordial images or the psychic residues of repeated patterns of experiences in the lives of our ancestors, which survive in our collective unconscious and are expressed in myth. This was said by Carl Jung. Now, who is Carl Jung? Carl Jung was a very important psychiatrist, a psychoanalyst, and was a great friend of a Swiss psychiatrist, that is, and a good friend of Freud, Sigmund Freud. Okay, and this concept of collective unconscious was brought out, or was coined, or was spoken about by Carl Jung. It is pronounced Jung and not Jung. Okay, Jung, Carl Jung. Now, so what is this collective unconscious that Carl Jung was speaking about? See, Jung believed in collective unconscious, unlike Freud and his other contemporaries. Freud, he was his good friend, but they differed in many ways. They differed, or they had difference of opinion when it came to various other topics like the collective unconscious and the individual unconscious. And Jung did not believe in Freud's Oedipus complex and all that being, there were a lot of differences. In fact, Jung criticized Freud, and there was a breach in their relationship after that. Anyway, Jung believed in collective unconscious, unlike Freud and his other contemporaries who believed in individual conscious. Jung believed that all elements of an individual's nature are present from birth. According to Jung, collective unconscious is a universal mind. Okay, it's a human mind or the universal mind, and in this universal mind you will find things that is present in everyone, irrespective of who you are or where you are from. Whether you are from America or Africa or India or China, there are things that are wired in us, that are present in us, which forms the collective unconscious. Okay? It is born, it is inborn. It is there from the birth itself. Freud believed that an individual's nature is created after he was born. Okay? But Jung differed from it. That is when they had difference of opinion. To Freud, everything, or he believed that an individual's nature is created after he is born. Whereas Jung considers it inborn. And according to Jung, it is the environment just brings out that nature. The environment, it's already there in that person, it is inborn in him, and the environment just brings it out. Whereas Freud, on the other hand, believed that an individual's nature is created after he is born, and the environment is the one that is responsible for creating a person's nature. It's the environment or the situations that creates the nature. That is what Freud believed. Whereas Jung differed from it. Jung says it's already inborn, it's wired in us, and once you are born, the individual, the environment or the situation just brings it out. It doesn't create. There is a difference. Jung believed that environment only brings out what is already stored inside him. It does not create anything. It's not new. It's not a new phenomena. It is already the attitude or the archetypes, that is the contents that is already wired in him, that is brought out by the situation, and not create. Environment does not create it, or the situations does not create it. It just brings out what is already stored in him. That's what Jung believed. And this is collective unconscious. Okay? So, what is collective unconscious? The idea, this collective unconscious is, in Jung's word, archaic, or I would say primordial types, that is with us, that is with universal images that have existed since the remotest time. Thus, there is this recurring primordial images. What is primordial? Primordial means inborn. It exists in us even before we are born. So, they are primordial images of human being in the myth, and myth illustrates those primordial. So, archetypes is a typical character, an action or a situation that seems to present or represent a universal pattern of human nature. It can also be called universal symbol. So, Jung was influenced by Eastern thoughts like Hinduism, Buddhism, the Taoist cultures, yoga. This made him very unpopular in the West to some extent. Now, archetype, therefore, according to Jung's concept, archetype is a model of a person, a personality or behavior. Every one of us belong to a type of character. Angry man, helpful one, depressive melancholic type. So, archetypes have been present in mythology and literature for hundreds and thousands of years. That is from the birth of civilization. So, when I say archetypes of the wise old man, the child, the mother, it doesn't mean a child. It means an adult who is like a child, or an adult who is like a mother, who has motherly instincts, and it need not be a female. It can also be a man like a mother who is caring, who is sacrificial, and a wise old man can be as an archetype, which means a person having all the characteristics of a wise man. He need not be an old person. He can be a young person. He can even be a child who behaves like a wise old man. So an archetype is a model, a personality, or a behavior. Okay, and there should be a harmonious blend of all these archetypes in a human being, and this harmonious blend alone makes the mental health. So the mental health of a person is maintained when we are in harmony with these archetypes, or when there is a blend. For example, a man having the characteristics of a child, he may be innocent, he may not be able to take decision, he may need others to take decision for you. Like for instance, Ambili, the film Ambili. Yeah, so that's an archetype. That can be taken as an archetype of a person, of a man who behaves like a child. Okay, and that would be a perfect example, because he does not try to change it. He harmoniously blends with his nature than being in conflict with it. He doesn't go into conflict with it, or he doesn't try to change it and act as though he's a mature human being. At that time, the moment when he accepts it and he is in harmony with it, then he will have peace. Okay, so we all have this universal psyche. And therefore, they all get embedded in the form of myth. Okay, when they get embedded in the form of, they come in the form of myth, in the form of literature. It also comes in the form of dreams. But these dreams becomes our personal experiences. Okay, so when it becomes a personal experience, according to Jung, dreams are our desires. The suppressed desires. Okay, so dreams are the ones that helps us to get what we won't be getting, that we cannot get. Okay, so they are dreams according to Jung, and he differs totally from Freud's dreams. So he says that the dreams are personal experiences, and this, when it comes in the form of social experiences, you get myths and literature. So myth and literature is concerning social experiences, the society, the social experience. Okay, when these archetypes are embedded or gets embedded in the form of social experiences, you get myth and literature. All right. So like you have, it can be, as I said, a universal symbol. It can be a character, it can be a theme, it can be a situation. Okay, it can be a characters like hero. Heroes are archetypes. You have heroes everywhere, irrespective of which culture, which caste, which place you belong to. You have the devil, the evil people. You have the magicians, you have father figures, mothers. All these characters are also archetypes. There are conflicts. Conflicts are also archetypes. Like for instance, there is always a young versus old. There is tradition versus modernity everywhere. So these are all archetypes, and these are all universal symbols. You have themes, archetypal themes, like love, like religion, war. You have myths, like Adam and Eve, God and Satan. You have symbols, symbols of the sun, the time, colors, fire, etc. So when certain symbols, motifs, characters continuously or reoccur not only in a particular nation but many other nations as well, that is, it gets into the stories having similar themes, motives, characters, and many communities, and they seem to acquire a similar pattern, then we refer to them as archetypes. Okay, so not just in one country or one nation, but many nations, where you have similar situations, where you have similar themes, where you have similar motives, characters. and or communities, and they have a specific pattern, they are given a specific pattern and it has a similarity, then we refer to them as archetypes. So the archetypes are what? What are archetypes? Archetypes are universal patterns or symbols or codes. They involve the symbols of light and darkness, colors, symbols of nature, cycles of seasons, and so on. Everybody is familiar with the idea of myth. I don't have to tell you. Myths are stories that have come down to us from generations and which we have become a part, or which has become a part of our consciousness. And we refer to them as symbols. Even the characters and the situations become symbols. You have Ramayana, where Ravan is the eternal symbol of evil. So you have a myth. You have myth, Ramayana. In Ramayana you have the myth of Ravan, which has come, these myths are stories that have come down to us from generations, and they become a part of our conscious. As long as we are Indians, we are aware of it. And these myths, they become so embedded in us that sometimes we refer to them as symbols. So Ravan is the eternal symbol of evil. So when you find an evil character, you can associate it with, it's an archetype of the evil. It's an archetype of the Ravan, of Ravan. And you have Ram. Ram is a symbol, eternal symbol of good. If you look at Mahabharata, you have Duryodhan. Duryodhan is a symbol of greed. Shaguni. Shaguni becomes a symbol of cunningness and trickery. You have the Pandavas. The Pandavas become the symbol of good. And if you read the present day literature, you will see that the Mahabharata myth manifests itself in different works of literature. You can find it in many works of literature, how they are represented. This myth of Mahabharata, how it manifests in several works of Indian literature or several works of literature. All writers seem to go back to many of these myths. Even in our films, you can see that. And these writers, they may try to adapt them. These writers may try to refute them. Some may try to refute them. Some may try to re-represent them. And thus is born the idea of myth. Okay. And there are other people who deal with myth. Now, if you look at this from a different angle, there are other people who deal with myths of different religion, of different communities, of nations. And if you try to observe a pattern in them, you will be able to find that they are universal. It's not just the Mahabharata myth. You will also find that it becomes universal. Carl Jung defines myths as follows. Quote, myth are first and foremost psychic phenomena that reveal the nature of the soul, unquote. So the idea of myth, that, as I was talking to you or I told you earlier, is to do with the collective unconscious. So it's all there in us. It is the recurring primordial images of human beings in the myth, and this myth illustrates those primordial images. He says that we carry these archetypes and they are stored in us. In fact, these primordial images manifest without understanding Jung, you cannot understand Fraser. Okay, so we begin with Jung because it is Jung who actually brings in this collective unconscious and the archetypes. Obviously, we'll be doing Jung in psychoanalytical theory also. Anyway, so what are archetypes? Archetypes are universal images and patterns, and they are stored in our individual and collective unconscious. The collective unconscious are shared by a race or a culture. So being a Christian may be in my collective unconscious. That is my part of my brain where all images are stored. I have a lot of archetypes related to Christian philosophy. Me being a Christian, I have a lot of archetypes that are stored in my brain relating to Christian philosophy. And these archetypes could include concepts related to love, concepts related to religion, concepts related to death, birth, life, struggle, survival, and so on. So my collective unconscious has a lot to do. I'm just giving an example. If you are taking the Christian philosophy, me being a Christian will have all these areas of these areas will have a lot to do with my Christian philosophy. Okay, and they are archetypes. These archetypes. And these archetypes exist in my unconscious part of exist in the unconscious part of my mind or my soul or my brain, as Jung puts it. And it is recreated, and it is there in every individual, not just me, in everyone according to what he or she or to which community or place he or she belongs to. And it is recreated in literature, it is recreated in other forms of art also, in movies, in art, in literature, and so on. Basically, this collective unconscious is part of the human brain according to Jung. It exists in the subconscious realm of our mind. It has both individual and collective conscience. So individual conscious would be, say, I had a very turbulent, very hostile life or childhood, maybe. Okay, just suppose that I or somebody had a very turbulent, I had a very happy childhood, but yeah, just imagine that somebody had a very turbulent or hostile childhood, and it is repressed. The effect of it is repressed in that person's mind, and it gets stored there, and it gets stored where? In the realm of the subconscious mind. Okay, that is the individual conscience. Okay, likewise, every community, race, nation has what? Has a collective unconscious. That again, which something that the people of that community share, the people of the race share, the people of the nations share. As Indians, marriage, you can say marriage is an archetype. It happens universally, right? It happens in Africa, it happens in Europe, it happens in India, it happens in China, it happens everywhere. So marriage can be considered as an archetype. Yes, and each one is different also. The marriage procedures, the marriage functions are, the traditions are totally different. Everyone has a difference there. Every type is different. But wedding is it has it has a, like Hindu marriage will have a similar collective conscious. When you take Hindu marriages alone, you will have a similarity in its tradition. You will have a similarity in the Jewish marriage. You will have a similarity in Christian marriages. You will have a similarity in the South Indian marriages. You will have a similarity in the North Indian marriages. You will have similarity in the European marriages, and so on. So these are collective unconscious. Okay, so though they are different, there is a collective conscience that everyone in that particular race or community share. So marriage can be considered as an archetype. It happens everywhere. They are all different, but a particular community will share a similar kind of traditions or similar kind of pattern. And if you look at it universally, marriage also is the union of two souls. It is a legal license to be together. So there also you can consider it as a collective unconscious. Clear? Okay. Now we shall also, before we move on to Fraser, let's look at some of the archetypes that Jung concentrates on. Jung concentrates on many archetypes. One is shadow. If you look at shadow, many stories places shadow as an important archetype. Okay. Then you have wise old man. Most stories have wise old men. Innocent child or the child hero. Or you have the archetype of the child, where and one example would be Ambali. Mother figure. Then you have the innocent maiden. Then the anima and the animus. Now that is what may need an explanation. The anima in man and the animus in woman. Anima in man means the feminine element in man. And animus in women means the masculine element in women. You also have other archetypes like trickster, the hero, and so on. Okay, so that's about it with Carl Jung. Now, it is based on Jung that the rest of the team starts their work. Now we begin our archetypal criticism based on your textbook. The first person, or the main important person of archetypal criticism, we haven't come to the person who can be considered the father yet, but the main person of archetypal criticism is James G. Fraser, and in his very seminal work, The Golden Bough, he followed the theory propounded or proposed by the psychiatrist Carl Jung. And Carl Jung is the person who applied the term archetype for primordial images, psychic residue and collective unconscious. He gave the term, Carl Jung gave the term he gave the term archetype. Okay. Now, James Fraser, he presents the concept. He takes a lot. He's influenced by Carl Jung, and he presents the concept of death and rebirth as omnipresent in most cultural mythologies. Here, he concentrates on this phenomenon, death and rebirth. Fraser attempted to establish myths as a manifestation of natural vegetation cycle, that is, death as final harvest and rebirth as spring. So the natural vegetation, using the natural vegetation circle, he attempted to bring out these concepts, the concept of death and rebirth, using this vegetation circle, the natural vegetation circle. He gives the example of Christ, his crucifixion, as the sacrifice of the hero, and his death as a final harvest, and the resurrection as rebirth or spring. So even this, according to him, has its primitive origin, as even this results from the natural cycle of death and recreation, it seems. So Fraser focused mostly on the materiality of myth, whereas Carl Jung focused on the myths on the unconscious, and Fraser focused on the materiality of myths. So it was culturally elaborated representation of the contents of the deepest recess of human psyche, the world of archetypes. The deepest recess means the shared part of the unconscious. That is okay. Now next you have Maud Botkin. Maud Botkin was one of the first scholars to apply Jung's ideas to literature. She rejects the notion that archetypes are stamped upon the physical organisms inherited in the structure of the brain. But they are persistent, they are cultural symbols that are passed, according to her, they are persistent cultural symbols that are passed down through generations through folklores, myths or literature. So she says it's not something that is already inherited or it becomes a part of the structure or it is not inborn. She rejects that notion and she says that it is something that is given down to us through folklores or myths and literature, and that is how we get it. That is, Jung said they were part of the unconscious. Jung said they were part of the unconscious mind shared by everybody, irrespective of what or who we are. It is inborn. Whereas Bodkin, she rejects that idea and she says that it is passed down to us by generation. She has used the archetypal pattern to refer to something that lives within us and which is source of medium of the effective presentation of ancient times.